this is what's great about this breakthrough, really, is that the aesthetics of the car and the safety of the driving process are all together.
I can say that this engine is significantly smoother. It is also a lot more powerful.
Motoring 93 is brought to you by Quaker State. Quaker State, one tough motor oil. And Midas, your under-the-car specialists for imports and domestics.
You know, I guess we all take for granted the ability to be able to drive. But if you're physically challenged, you take absolutely nothing for granted, especially driving. Oh sure, the physically challenged can drive with the use of hand controls, but when was the last time you went to a dealership and found a demo car equipped with hand controls for a test drive? Or how about rentals? Get the picture? Well, we're now going to meet a man who believes he has found the solution to those problems, and he's also proven that necessity is indeed the mother of invention.
Two men will appear in court today charged in an arson death.
David Onley is a morning newscaster at Toronto's City TV. At the age of 3, he suffered polio. In 1969, David began driving with the aid of hand controls and knows only too well the problems facing the disabled.
This is a 1991 Ford Taurus station wagon. I bought it brand new just 2 years ago, and one of the first things I had to do before I could even buy the car was to determine whether or not the hand controls that I had would actually fit the vehicle in the first place. And to do that, I had to go to a dealership and with a friend of mine who's a mechanic and actually remove an entire lower plate underneath the dashboard and centering underneath the steering column. And then we just had to kind of jury rig and guesstimate that the hand controls would actually fit. On that basis, I purchased the car. And after purchasing the car, then we had the big acid test as to whether or not the hand controls would actually fit in. Of course, the major problem is that you really don't have an opportunity to test drive the car that you want to buy.
The big reason for that is up till now, hand controls have required major modifications to the vehicles, like cutting and drilling and things like that, which you can appreciate a dealer wouldn't want to do on speculation.
In 1986, Craig Lentz was flying a crop duster in Weyburn, Saskatchewan, when his plane hit a high-tension wire, leaving him paralyzed from the waist down. First, he designed hand controls to allow him to fly again. And now he believes he has invented the most advanced set of driving hand controls on the market. They can be installed in 30 minutes without a single scratch to the car.
I mean, vehicles now have plastic dashes, wraparound dashes, tilt telescope mechanisms that are different from before, and these things all lead to problems. Airbags now. Just modern technology has led the vehicle to where it is today, but the hand controls haven't gone along with that technology. I mean, your disabled population in North America, you got 43 million disabled people, which covers all kinds of disabilities. But I know a lot of people would think, you know, a wheelchair when they're thinking somebody that needs hand controls. I mean, somebody that's got a prosthesis needs hand controls. Somebody that has MS, that has low reflex time in their lower limbs, needs hand controls. I mean, the market and the users for hand controls is a lot more than the actual wheelchair user, which is, I think a lot of people look at disability, the first thing they think of is that wheelchair sign and think wheelchairs, but disabilities go far beyond that.
The first component I'm going to install is the lower brake assembly.
With me I've got Graham Dewhurst with Doncaster Medical. Graham's going to do the installation for us. The good folks at Toyota Canada were good enough to supply us with an LS400 Lexus. I've done the installations, I do my own installations, but I don't want the people to think that they're expected to just order this product and throw it in themselves. It's about a 30-minute installation, but as with all hand controls, the big thing is to get down to the pedals and the brake, and a lot of disabilities don't allow people to do that.
It's really a tremendous improvement on what's out there in the market now. I think what's very significant is the lack of stress points, if you will, in the design. You feel very, very confident that that brake mechanism, for instance, is never going to come loose unless you take it apart. And similarly, the gas or the throttle, it's a very solidly made piece of machinery, and it just integrates so beautifully, and it's even aesthetically, of course, with the interior of the car.
Even with the telescope, the unit will come down, doesn't affect that part of the system, even the seat slides up. It's Forward for brake, back for accelerator. And that's the operation of our system. You go out and take it for a drive and you'll see how it works. Other hand controls, some hand controls, you pull it down like this on a right angle, but when you get into some of these vehicles, you haven't got a lot of leg room. And to push down, a lot of people will move their leg over to the side or something like that to give them the extra space, which with this system, it never does drop. It's a straight forward, straight back motion. And again, once you get on the highway and you get up to speed, your cruise control system, it works the same as any other system. You set the cruise, it's on, it's set, and you're on cruise control as normal. My hope is to make things like test drives, courtesy cars, car rentals, situations that most people take for granted, make them available to the disabled people by the people who are trying to provide the service. I'd like to continue working with the auto manufacturers. I think there's a big part that the auto manufacturers can play in working in the development of their products to adapt different types of mobility aids, whether it be hand controls, left foot accelerators, trunk lifts for scooters, just different things that, I mean, there's a market out there for it. It's a market niche, and I mean, everybody knows somebody in that situation that could use that type of equipment.
I think it's significant that this is someone who, in the first instance, has had to overcome a disability himself, and so he's really sat down and figured out what is it that is a problem or an annoyance to those in the disabled community, and having tried it out myself, I can tell you that, you know, he's hit it right on target.
Following our interview, Craig lost some of his promised financial support. Motoring 93 believes that Craig's hand controls are the answer to many of the problems facing the physically challenged. So if you would like to get involved in the project or would just like to learn more about these hand controls, contact Craig at this address.
Test Drive with Graham Fletcher.
This week on Test Drive, we look at the 1993 Hyundai Elantra. Now, despite only being on the road for a year, Hyundai opted to freshen the appearance. But the big surprise, and perhaps the best bonus that you get for 93, is a larger displacement engine under the hood. For 1993, the Elantra features a new and more powerful 1.8-litre engine. Now, this engine is standard on the GLS and optional on the GL. Rather than being a board and stroke version of the original 1.6-litre engine, this new engine is heavily based on the 2-litre 4 found in the Sonata. As such, this new engine features twin counter-rotating balance shafts. These are designed to damp out engine vibration and provide a smoother, more refined ride. I can say that this engine is significantly smoother. It is also a lot more powerful. The horsepower has been bumped to 124, and perhaps more importantly, the available torque is up 13.75% to 116 pounds-feet at 4,500 RPM. In the race from 0 to 100 kilometers, the Elantra requires just over 10 seconds. Not too shabby at all for an Econobox. The Elantra features a fully independent suspension system. Now, up front there's McPherson struts, and in the back there's a multi-link trailing arm setup. Now, through the pylons, this car has been tracking a fairly precise line. However, as with most of the cars in this category, when you begin to get towards the edge of the envelope, it lets you know in a bit of a hurry. Now, the stabilizers front and rear on this vehicle are controlling the body roll quite well. Out on the open road, the whole system gives you a very nice, congenial ride. One thing Hyundai have done exceptionally well on the new Elantra is the brake system. The brake pedal is one of the easiest I've encountered to modulate, given that it doesn't have an anti-lock brake system. In a nutshell, you can yield maximum brake effort without fear of locking up the wheels. Now, when I drop the anchor like that, we were pulling around 28 on the decelerometer, which will give us a reading of about 115 feet from 80k. The Elantra features a 4-speed automatic transmission complete with dual modes. The normal mode returns best gas mileage. In the power mode, each gear is held a little longer to get you further into the rev range, which is where you'll find the power. It also has an on-off switch for the overdrive unit. Now, I found this item particularly handy in hilly terrain. Inside, the Elantra is loaded with some extras you usually only find in more expensive cars. Adjustable seatbelt anchors and a power trunk release being good examples. The seats are well contoured, offering plenty of support in the right areas. The large side and seat base bolsters provide the required level of lateral support, and for once the dead pedal sits at exactly the right angle, making it comfortable to use. The rear seat environment is quite comfortable with ample head and legroom. Our Tester, being a base model, lacked the fold-down rear seat. That said, the trunk is a good size and features a nice low liftover. Access to all driving controls is good, and the analog instrumentation is complete and legible in every respect. As I mentioned, our Tester is a basic model, the point being that it features a curious mix of equipment. Manual mirrors, windows and locks, yet it features cruise control. Now, I for one would gladly dispense with the cruise in favour of power locks. The standard radio, complete with an anti-theft feature, offers great sound quality. The thing that irked me most about the Elantra, and therefore makes up this week's pet peeve, was the amount of wind noise. Now, despite having what is tantamount to a double seal on the door, at highway speeds the amount of wind noise can only be described as excessive. And the reason it irked me was because the rest of the car has been executed with such precision that this really does let it down rather badly. Further to my comments on the handling characteristics, the choice of Michelin XGT H4 All Seasons is to be commended. They provide the car with great grip and directional stability without being overly noisy. To succeed in the EconoBox market, one has to make a car that is inexpensive without being cheap. In the 1993 Elantra, Hyundai have succeeded in this aspect very well. In fact, it's worthy of being on anybody's shopping list. The question that has to be asked, though, is how it's going to fare against some very stiff competition. Ford Escort, Toyota Corolla, Nissan Sentra, even the Honda Civic. These cars have been perennial winners. I have a sneaking suspicion, though, that Hyundai have a winner on their hands.
Keeping our air clean is something we all naturally believe in. Well, most of us. Behind this fence is a rather sad scene that many Toronto motorists pass each day. These electric buses were dumped here about a year ago. Local councillors had all sorts of reasons for their decision, but the bottom line is these vehicles were replaced by fuel-guzzling, pollution-producing buses. You figure it out. Anyway, it's now time to head to our Motoring 93 garage and see what our mechanic Bill Gardner was up to this week.
This week we want to have a look at the two major styles of headlamp system used on today's vehicles. The aerodynamic style right here on the new vehicles, very smooth and graceful looking, blends right into the bodywork, and also helps the aerodynamics of the new vehicles. Now there's the kind of bulb that would go in a unit like that, and sooner or later these bulbs burn out, just as they do on the older style, the seal beam unit right here. Now there's the seal beam right there, much larger unit as you can see, fairly cheap, $12 to $20 depending on the quality and where you buy it. But there's a few key differences in how you go about changing those units, and that's what we want to look at today. With the seal beam, you've got a number of screws to remove in order to get that unit out. And quite often those screws can be rusted, seized, stripped, etc., and it can give you a hard time. Now, I'm using a drill gun, but probably when you're doing your own, you're going to use something like a screwdriver, and the best deal to get yourself is a magnetic tip screwdriver like this one, because it'll actually hold onto those screws so you won't fumble them and lose them in the snow or in the bodywork of the vehicle. Now, there's usually 4 screws around the perimeter of this trim ring holding the headlamp in. You want to remove those 4 screws to get the headlight out. Now, you can also see another set of screws, one here and one over here, for aiming this unit. And we'd install something like this on the front of it in order to aim that unit, and we can adjust it vertically and horizontally. Now, be careful when you're changing the headlights not to disturb these 2 screws, and your alignment should be close when you're finished. If it's not right, though, take it to a mechanic and have it properly adjusted so that you're not offending other drivers and you get the best use out of your lights. Now we're going to flip over to that new vehicle and have a look at just how those ones are changed. They're much easier. You actually don't even need any tools to change most of them. You just reach in the back of the lamp, pull off the electrical connector, turn the lock ring to the left a quarter turn, set it aside, and just pull the bulb right out of the back of the lamp assembly. Now when you're handling these bulbs, make sure that you handle them only from the back. Don't touch the glass portion of the bulb. If you do inadvertently touch this, polish off any fingerprints with a Kleenex. You can see an O-ring around here that seals the bulb into the unit, and there's some alignment dowels. This bulb will only go in one position. When you reinstall it, push it all the way in, install the lock ring, give it a quarter turn till it locks, and then take the plug and snap it home. Now one of the big improvements on this design as well is the fact that there's a seal around here and in the back where the wires enter this plug. So this plug doesn't get any corrosion in on the 3 terminals like the old style, and it's almost unheard of to have a bad connection or a corroded connection in this type of headlight. Very, very seldom do we see problems in that area. Now moving around to the front of the headlamp, we can see 3 knobs here, 3 little dowels that are a reference point for an aimer, and that's something that's similar to the seal beam unit. On the seal beam we also have those 3 knobs, and that's what intersects with the pickup points on our aimer. Goes on something like that and allows us to aim that headlight. And as I mentioned earlier, it's important every once in a while to have those headlamps aimed. Now the downside to these aerodynamic headlights is the fact that if you smash one accidentally, they're quite expensive to replace. Now this particular one's made of plastic, a lot of them are made of glass, but one thing that I found is that they're all quite expensive. $120 to $150 a side is not uncommon. The bulbs are only about $12 to $15, about the same as a seal beam, and as you saw earlier, they're quite compact. The box is very small, so it's a good idea to pick up a spare bulb, keep it in the glove box, and you can actually change it with your bare hands whenever it burns out. You don't have to come and see somebody like me. Till next week, I'm Bill Gardner for Motoring 93.
Some call it a sports car legend, but it's better known as the Lotus 7. More than 30 years have passed since the first 7 was built, but the Super 7 of the 80s still sets the standard by which other sports cars are judged. Motoring 93 dropped in on Caterham Cars in Pickering, Ontario, a company dedicated to keeping the legend alive.
The Super 7 was built and designed by Colin Chapman in 1957. It was built by him until 1973, at which time he decided to move Lotus upmarket, and Caterham Cars purchased the right to name and produce the car as the Super 7. And they've been producing the car since '73, so the car itself dates back to 35 years. What makes a Super 7 special is its unique power to weight ratio. It only weighs 1,200 pounds. It's extremely agile, it's very quick on acceleration, and very good braking, exceptional cornering abilities, and it has such a legend about the car. The cost ranges from $18,700 to $35,000. Who would buy them? Strictly car enthusiasts who know the legend of a Lotus Super 7. It's a car that was designed years ago, but is extremely competitive with any of today's modern sports cars.
Having wrapped up our first batch of long-term testers, it's time to introduce you to our second wave. First up, we have the totally new Mazda MX-6 Mystere, featuring the new 2.5-liter V6, matched with a 5-speed manual transmission. In the short term since picking up this flame red coupe, it has turned more than a few heads. Next up is the brand new Subaru Legacy Touring Wagon. We added this vehicle because the wagon concept seems to be enjoying somewhat of a renaissance. Subaru's newest wagon uses a turbocharged 2.2-liter flat-4 engine matched with a 4-speed automatic transmission. Last but not least is the baby Infiniti, the G20. This automobile features all the amenities you'd expect to find in any upscale sedan. Power is provided by a 2.0-liter 4, complete with a 4-speed automatic transmission that features Nissan's award-winning limited slip differential. There will be complete road tests on each of these vehicles in upcoming editions of Motoring 93. And as before, we'll wrap up the test with a final report showing the average fuel consumption, cost per kilometer, and a brief overview of life with all three.
Our Midas tip of the week concerns engine oil. Absolutely the most important fluid you put in your vehicle. It's very important that you check the condition and level of that engine oil on a regular basis. Check it manually. Don't rely on the gauges or lights on the dash to tell you. And it should be checked every time you go through a full tank of fuel. Now, if you need to add partial liters of oil, it's quite easy with today's containers to add half a liter or even a quarter of a liter of oil and reseal that container. Now, when you want to find out the type of oil, the grade, and how frequently to change it, all that information is in your owner's manual, so consult it. There's usually 2 service schedules, one for light duty service and one for severe service. Determine your type of usage and follow it. Now, the normal procedure when you have an oil change is to attach the service sticker to the door jamb. I don't agree with that at all. Put it on the top side of the sun visor so it's a constant reminder every time you flip that visor down as to when you last changed it and what type of oil to use. It'll get you thinking along these terms. That's your Midas tip of the week.
I can't tell you what car is going to be Car of the Year for 1993, but I can tell you, you're not going to find it at a General Motors dealership. I'll tell you why when I come back in Kenzie's Corner.
Kenzie's Corner with Jim Kenzie.
Car of the Year programs are kind of fun. They're a chance for automobile journalists to get together and distill a year's worth of road testing and pick just our favorite new cars for the model year. Motoring 93 will be doing our own Car of the Year program later in the season, and so will the Automobile Journalists Association of Canada. Now, this group, nicknamed AJAC, consists of about 90 writers and broadcasters from coast to coast. We get together every year at Shannonville Motorsport Park near Belleville, Ontario, and choose our overall favorite new cars for the model year. But this year, cars from General Motors will not be eligible because General Motors has chosen not to participate in this year's program. Now, some critics say that GM is upset because they don't win these awards very often. Still, they should take some heart that last year the Cadillac Seville was a very close second to the BMW 325 as the overall Car of the Year, and in the subcompact category, the Saturn was just edged out by the new Honda Civic. Now, 5 years ago, if you said that General Motors could compete with BMW or Honda in a competition like this, people would have said you were crazy. Still, GM feels that although our program is democratic, 90 people is too many. They don't have the confidence that there are 90 people with the depth of experience and the breadth of knowledge necessary to make an informed decision. Maybe they prefer programs like Motoring 93's, where only the seasoned handful of veterans that you see on the show every week are the people that choose the awards. Still, as a former president of AJAC, I'm sorry to see General Motors leave the program, because how valuable can a program be if a company representing 36% of the market is not involved? Still, I can assure you that AJAC's doing everything we can to make the award program even better, and we hope GM will be back in the fold very soon. I'm Jim Kenzie.
Well, that's it for this week. Make sure you join us next week. Well, maybe you don't want to. If you don't like the beach and bikinis and Corvettes, you might not be interested. But then again, if you are, we'll be here with more stories about cars and the people who drive them.
Motoring 93 has been brought to you by Quaker State. Quaker State, one tough motor oil. And Midas, your under-the-car specialists for imports and domestics.